She's 18 and legal. She's retarded.
Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. Pilgrim!
Hello, friends. It is I, your host, Pilgrim, or X, or Pilgrim X, or X1620, or whatever you want to call me. Here for another edition of the Chill Zone. We are going to be listening to some Dungeon Synth, cracking a few packs. You know, see what we can get into. Might go ahead and add these decals to our Space Marines. That'll most likely prove to be a little difficult, but nothing we can't handle, huh, guys? Okay. But I'm kind of veering off to the side. I am gaming at the same time as streaming. I'm trying to find my little thing I got from that band, from that card shop. Here it is. This is what we're going to start off listening to. Shout out to Rafe Knight. Rafe Knight, guys. Go check him out. Here's a little. What up, Garrett? Doing a deep chill zone tonight. I don't know if you've got how many chill zones you've been through. Probably quite a few at this point. You know, we're just chilling, not taking nothing too serious. This is what I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to be listening on this while I'm cracking packs. Dungeon Synth. It's pretty dope music. And now this came, I've been working on a dinosaur deck and I ordered a card and this came in the mail with it. Not this album, but promo for it. Man, that's crazy. A lot of crazy stuff going on in our world, but we'll get into all that. No rush. I am gonna go ahead and crack this first pack open. Let's see what we get. Yeah. Great night. Oh, we got right here, we got a clue of the word pack. That's the art. This is from the Outlaw series. I think I got this pack backwards. Let me go to delete. Got a few of these armored armadillos. Got a few of them. This could be handy. Too crazy so far, huh? Oh, nice. Could be working on Cowboy Deck.
Let's see what we got in this fridge.
Fuck is this commercial?
What's a recipe?
Voice. I don't know, man. Making Outlaw's deck. I don't know what color. I'm not making the Cactus Folk deck, but that's going to be real complicated. A wild Thunder Junction. A native Thunder Junction. Oh, nice. I got a desert. They come in handy with some of these cards. Fortune Loyal Seed. Let's look up his value real quick. It's coming in at 99 cents. Blue. They got 99 cents for him. And we got Savage Smash. That could go into the red and green deck. We got a foil. Demonic Record. Rare. An uncommon, not a rare. Definitely put Loyal Seed, maybe put him in my Frodo deck. That's what we got from that Thunder Junction deck. Thunder Junction pack. We're gonna go ahead and open another Carlog Manor. I only had 2 at the Walgreens I went to today, so open them up. Nice. Big thermal. Definitely work. Trying to figure out the mechanics behind a detective deck. Nice. Got that dual. Might prove to be rather useful. Oh, we got a case. Land. We got the fire stack open. So far, nothing too crazy, huh? Let's go and open this Hell Drain. How the hell are you doing today, Garrett? You and the one person we have kind of creeping. word of game. You buy 6 draft packs. Damn. Off of the back, we got a foil. Got an enchantment that looks crazy. Crazy looking enchantment. Dang, these cards. What up, Michigan? Good to see you too, Big Pimpin'. Yeah, I might have to wake up early, give my dad a ride to work in the morning. Nice. Don't make fun of me, but these can come in handy making a fairy commander deck. Put all the brains back open. Let's see what our last pack. Let's see what we get in our last pack. Let's see if it's a bust or what. But I feel like we might. I saw a little peek of a couple of them. I feel like we might have got something. We have a foil. Vanifer above Enigma.
Your father knows about saving money. Everything I'm wearing, I've had since boot camp.
And I just saved.
Let's see what kind of value we got with Vanifer. We're at tcgplayer.com. Well, it should be worth $2. Let me look at my phone real quick. No way. I feel like this next one's gonna be a damn good one. Make me download the Bloomberg. We're lucky we could see that with Vanifar worth 62 cents. We'll do something like that. Uh-oh. Dude, this guy, he's my favorite of the Planeswalkers, Jace. Worth $3.30. Wow. Musical Garrett. They're gonna have to make a deck with this face. Let's go to Reddit and see the news. See what fucking news we got. We done cracked 4 packs. You know Daddy has it like that. You know I can crack packs once a week. So the fuck you got here, y'all? Uh-oh. Damn. Let's see what kind of news. Let's go through Reddit.
I haven't come back from my degree sooner just because.
Shut the fuck up, bitch. You don't need no degree.
Are you drinking, buddy? I'll be right back.
Well, it's time to find a new apartment on Zillow. Huh, these are all great. And this one's close to Mom. I can finally go to Sunday dinners again. Or maybe we could even do them here.
Zillions of apartments, one way home. Zillow Rentals. Tired of running back and forth to the pharmacy for pet prescriptions? With Chewy Pharmacy, your prescriptions get delivered. Just fill your cart, enter your pet and vet info, then we'll contact your vet and deliver right to your door. It's the easy way to get your pet's prescriptions. Plus, get 20% off your first order at Chewy Pharmacy.
And I'm back. Ryan, damn good to see you. You're working. You work that late night. That third shift action. Let's turn this down. I have a news story. Kind of crazy news story. I'm going to throw a couple of them throughout the stream. So is the style. East Point, Georgia. A restaurant worker says his manager chased him from the business and threatened his life at gunpoint because he forgot to take out all the trash before clocking out. Now, East Point police are trying to track down the manager. His name is spelled Quenton. Quentin Collins, age 29, told Channel 2's Tom Jones He still can't believe what happened. Not Tom Jones, the singer, as you might think. It's like you write a person up for forgetting to do all that, he said. Collins admits he forgot to take out all the trash as his shift ended at the Chipotle on Camp Creek Parkway on Saturday. He says what his manager did after that is nowhere near in the employee handbook. You don't chase them down and pull a gun. That's otherworld, he described. Oh wait, here's a little. Let's watch an interview. Let's listen to the interview. This is a real story. Matrix attack in real time. Let's pause Rafe Knight. Then the Matrix will send shit that is absolutely and totally, utterly retarded. I'm gonna finish the story, then we're gonna watch the video. You don't chase him down and pull a gun. That's otherworld, he described. Now to kind of pick up where we is at. Collins says he was in his first week of training at the restaurant. A restaurant is a debatable term to call Chipotle. He says he had no run-ins with his manager before that. That, he said, as he clocked out in a hurry to catch his MARTA bus, and his manager screamed at him about the trash not be taken out. Collins says he continued out the door to catch his bus. He says that's when his manager chased him and threatened him at gunpoint. Collins said that the manager became distracted by traffic and a nearby cop, and that's when he got away. Customers were stunned by the allegations. I think that was wrong. It was wrong, one woman said outside the restaurant. There's no excuse in the world for someone to pull a gun on someone for not taking the trash out, Jason Werner explained. Other officers began investigating and say the manager hasn't been back to work since that night. They say surveillance video at the restaurant shows the manager leaving right after Collins left, then returning 15 minutes later. They're looking to the other surveillance cameras to see exactly what happened. Collins hasn't been back to the Camp Creek location. He says having his life threatened is messing with his mental health. So he's going to try to get a lawsuit out of this, most definitely. I probably would too as well, for sure. It sounds crazy. I don't know. I wonder what made that manager guy so angry that he's like, I'm going to pull a gun on this motherfucker. They might have to give me some medicine to help me sleep because every time I close my eyes, I'm in that moment. I'm staring at death. I'm staring at death, he said. Collins says Chipotle has offered him counseling. Chipotle shared a statement on Channel 2 Action News on Friday confirming that the manager had been fired. We are aware of the incident that occurred last week at our restaurant in East Point, Georgia, and grateful no team members or guests were harmed by the senseless act. The individual in question has been terminated, and we are working closely with law enforcement on the matter. Police say they will put out an arrest warrant for the manager if he doesn't come to speak with them by Friday. We're not naming the manager since he hasn't been charged. Okay, let's see what they got to say. Let's see how the news frames this too, how they sound, how dramatic this bitch is.
Him from the business and then pointed a gun at him, and it's all because he forgot to take out all of the trash. Channel 2's Tom Jones reports now from East Point.
It's like you write a person up that forget to do that.
29-year-old Quentin Collins admits
He
he
like,
forgot to take out all the
right a
trash
person up
at
that forget to do that.
Chipotle on Camp Creek Saturday. He says what his manager did after that is nowhere in the employee handbook.
Chase him down to pull a gun. That's otherworld.
Collins says he was in his first week of training at the restaurant. He says his manager screamed at him about the trash, then chased him and threatened him at gunpoint.
Exact words, I'm going to bust your next time I see you.
Collins says his manager became distracted by traffic and a cop car, and that's when he got away. Customers were stunned by the allegations.
I think that was wrong. It was wrong.
There's no excuse in the world for someone to pull a gun on someone for not taking out the trash.
Officers began investigating and say the manager hasn't been back to work since that night. They say surveillance video at the business shows the manager leaving right after Collins left and returning about 15 minutes later. Collins says having his life threatened is messing with his mental health.
They might have to give me some medicine to help me sleep because every time I close my eyes, I'm in that moment where it is I'm staring at death.
And Collins says the restaurant has offered him counseling. I reached out to the restaurant for a comment, still waiting to hear back. East Point police say they will put out an arrest warrant for that manager if he doesn't contact them by tomorrow. We're not naming the manager since he hasn't been charged. We're live in East Point. Tom Jones, Channel 2 Action.
Coming law.
It would limit what kids can see,
Crazy.
change up harmful algorithms, and also place age restrictions.
What
We'll
is
talk
they
about this with
talking
Tanya
about?
Jordan with Bark Technologies, a company dedicated to children's online safety.
Tighten age verification tools.
Why does this matter? You and I talk about this all the time. Why is that important to age verification?
Get platforms to take reasonable measures to mitigate harm when designing their products, and would also tighten age verification
It
tools.
took a lot of
Why does
dumbass
this
fucking
matter? You and I
idiot
talk about this all the
commenters.
time. Why is that important to age verification and tightening?
Get them
having those
off
tools?
of here.
Well, it's horrifying to think, but reality that internet safety has not been revisited, looked at, and updated since 1998. Since I was in high school, we
This is
didn't
a
even
fake.
have
Bitch,
smartphones and social media.
they don't. Kids don't need to be on no fucking commercials. No. Let's watch this document on BitChute. Uncovering the truth. Shout out. Shout out, shout out, shout out. A little bit more. Let's listen to some more Rafe Night while we're chilling. Listen more Rafe Night. What we're trying to find. What up, Virginia? I'm about to be playing finding some documentary for us to all listen to. Kind of sleep to. Big news for all your soda drinkers out there. FDA has banned BVO, a soda additive and flame retardant also. And so I guess they're starting to take health serious. I ain't heard his speech at the RNC. That shit. Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan, Hawk Tug Girl. All this shit is inseparable to me, you know? All of it seems very psyopy, if you know what I mean. But probably funny. Really got a little comedic. A little ha-ha. I'm trying to figure out what game I'm gonna download on my damn. There we go. Now we're in Dark Cloud. Sorry about that brief. Soda and flame retardant. Both made out of the same shit. Who would have thought, right? Wow. BOV also contains bromine. Okay, so BOV is in the agency's original GRAS list, which encompassed ingredients that were generally recognized as safe. BVO also contains bromine, an ingredient found in brominated flame retardants, which are added to products like textiles and building materials to prevent the spread of fire. These wildly disparate uses raised questions among consumer groups and health advocates over damn, it took me way off what I was reading. Whether BVO, while generally recognized as being safe, damn, I keep on getting lost when I'm reading. Dang, that's just shit that's what makes Cokes make the sound that go click when you open them up. Interesting. We might listen to an hour of Alex Jones. Might even listen to David Icke. Damn it. Yeah, so FDA is moving to remove more bad shit in your food. That's good. That's good. I do want to say, just because someone is young does not mean that they are stupid, and just because someone is old does not mean that they are smart. Oh, there's a complete Illuminati card game. We could check that out real quick while I kind of touch
I'm probably
base,
getting off
figure it
topic
out.
a little bit with this, but just go and look up words such as individual.
Have y'all never heard of this game? If y'all never heard of this game, then this shit is about to blow your mind.
A lot of people think this means to be someone who is unique, but really it comes from the word indivisible, which means you are simply one peg in the massive porridge of human population, and you are indivisible to anybody else. Therefore, you are not unique at all. You are indivisible from the masses. That's what the word individual means. If you look up the word nice, that's a good one. They're always telling us to be nice. If you look up the origins of the word nice, it comes from the Latin necere, which means to be ignorant. Later in Middle French, it was stupid and uninformed. So basically, to be nice is to be ignorant, stupid, and uninformed, and just be quiet and don't rock the boat and just be nice. Well, folks, I don't think we should be nice, and I think we really should begin to really comprehend the language that we are speaking. But as I said, I'm probably getting a little off topic with that. But etymology is a very interesting subject and something that I do recommend people investigate. But folks, this whole Pizzagate thing is very, very carefully being orchestrated. The way attention is being shifted onto the pizza store, as I said earlier, there are many people who are attacking the pizza store, and the pizza store should not be the focus of attention. Attacking the pizza store will achieve two very predictable outcomes. One, it will achieve the censoring of the independent media, and we'll see the introduction of massive internet restrictions and mean the end of the internet as we know it. And two,
I've been thinking the Pizzagate thing was something to come out against the common people, come out against conspiracy theorists.
It will result in all of the sleeping masses out there being convinced that there was really nothing to any of this pedophile investigation, and they will all throw the real and factual pedophile information out with the bathwater when they throw out the attacks against a small business. That's how it will be played. It will allow the pedophiles to get off scot-free and to be laughing while they do it, because they just pulled off a hoodwink right in front of everybody's faces. They exposed themselves to the world and then convinced everybody not to believe it simply due to the attacks upon a small business. You know, at this point, all they really have to do is go and assassinate Nalafontas and members of his family or a couple of his friends, or even just him by himself. Just go and blow his head off in his apartment, claim that it was suicide, and then the mainstream media will have a field day of how a small business owner was driven to suicide due to fake news, and then you can say goodbye to the internet as we know it. And not only that, but it will allow the pedophiles who are running this world to expand their harvest and make it even more obvious, and people won't do anything about it because no one will believe it, because I'll just look at it and I'll go, oh, that's that Pizzagate thing again. We already proved that this isn't happening. And how preposterous that you could think these upstanding politicians, these people we employ to keep us safe, these people who are fighting these wars in our name and keeping us all safe from terrorism, how preposterous that you could think these people would have a bad or dangerous bone in their body. How preposterous for you to think that they could be hurting us in any way. That's what will happen, folks, if people do not shift focus back to where it should be, which is the content of the Podesta emails, the pedophile ring that these emails expose, and all of the information we've gathered all around the world for so many years proving this pedophile ring exists. We can actually link it now with these emails. We can see through the release of the Podesta emails how necessary it is for politicians' emails to be open to scrutiny, how it is so necessary for us to have transparency in government, because we cannot allow this situation to continue. And if we play things the right way, we can move in that direction. We can move towards exposing this entire sick circle of cacostocracy that runs this world. But if we continue to focus on the pizza store, it's all going to go away, folks. The pizza store's a play, and it's been put there as a play. And unfortunately, people are buying right into it. All the world is a stage, ladies and gentlemen. When a leak like this comes out, which is such a revealing leak, then it needs to be managed and micromanaged. And the most important thing to do with this leak is to shift attention away from the actual leak itself to a side issue. And that's what they've done with the introduction of the pizza store. Sure, there's connections to this pizza store, but the fervor that's been whipped up around it and making that the center of focus is exactly what the mainstream media wants people to do, because that gives them the tool that they need to implement their counter-narrative and introduce their anti-script to what is really going on. So people need to be very, very careful of how they're being played. But I think we've reached break time here, folks, so I'm going to have to leave it there for now, and we're going to have a break. Thank you for joining me on the air today. It's always a pleasure to have your company, and I'll speak to you again in a few minutes. Thanks for listening. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, so Pizzagate is an interesting phenomenon, but it's important that people see how it's controlled and how it's being played, because Pizzagate has the potential to either expose the system once and for all and free humanity, or the potential to completely lock humanity down and prevent all the sleeping masses from ever lifting back the veil and looking at the workings of the machine again. It really has the potential to go either way. It's just how it's going to be played. And people have to understand how these leaks are managed and how much is it really involved in all this. Even with the link with the Podesta brothers and Madeleine McCann, you know, the identikit pictures, they match up so dramatically that you have to wonder whether they're real. You have to wonder how, when there was only reported to be one abductor of Madeleine McCann, cited by two different witnesses, how the two different witnesses could come up with such completely different descriptions of the perpetrator, and why each of the two descriptions, when you put them together, happen to look exactly like the Podesta brothers. So you've got to wonder whether this is planted misinformation that's been planted by, I don't know, FBI sources or some forces within law enforcement that has been used to gain leverage over the Podesta brothers, or whether there is actually truth to the matter and truth that they can be placed in Portugal at the time of Madeleine McCann's disappearance. So there's a lot of stuff to look at when investigating this, folks. There's a lot of ways that we're being played, and it's really important that people step back and look at things objectively and be careful what they believe, and be careful not to allow that belief to block out something else that might be right in their face. Something that
he was just quiet, and I've never noticed anything off. I mean, he was just a normal kid to me, walking around the neighborhood. I mean, he was just a bit odd. That's all.
Thomas Crooks, the 20-year-old man who tried to shoot and kill former President Trump, was described as a loner. Now a new report says he actually flew a drone over the rally where he tried to assassinate the former president.
They see something that said, take a look what happened.
I look at 7 new details about the man who tried to go down in history as an assassin. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. It's been more than a week.
He went down in history as a failed nerd
on top of a
instead.
building in Butler, Pennsylvania, with an AR-15 and a rangefinder, and fired several shots at former President Trump. Sadly, firefighter Corey Comparator was killed as he shielded his wife and daughter from the gunfire. 2 other men were wounded and remain in the hospital. Former President Trump was grazed in the ear and survived. Snipers shot and killed Crooks, who was seen on the roof of the building well before he fired those shots. There are reports it was as long as 19 minutes before.
He's going down!
Stay over here. Immediately, the question was asked, who is this man who tried to kill a former president, a candidate for the highest office in the land, and why? And how was he allowed on the roof of the building? How was that roof left unguarded? President Trump discussed that unguarded roof in an interview with Fox News' Jesse Waters.
Mistakes were made. They were monitoring this guy for an hour beforehand.
Yeah.
No one told you not to take the stage?
No, nobody mentioned it. Nobody said there was a problem. And I would have waited for 15. They could have said, let's wait for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, something. Nobody said, I think that was a mistake. How did somebody get on that roof? And why wasn't he reported? Because people saw that he was on the roof. I mean, you had Trumpers screaming, the woman in the red shirt. She was screaming, there's a man on the roof. And then other people said, there's a man on the roof who's got a gun. And that was quite a bit before I walked onto the stage. So you would have thought somebody would have done something about it.
I also spoke to a former sniper who's been on a detail for then Vice President Biden about that roof being left open. Jimmy, since you've been on this detail before, do you feel that there should have been snipers on that roof where Crooks was?
Yeah, the fact that that building wasn't secured to a point where someone could crawl on top of it, that makes no sense to me. The facility of where I did it, we were also at an airport, and every building had either a deputy or a Secret Service when I was there. And this was for Vice President Biden at the time. They were mainly with him. Everything else was secured by local law enforcement. But we had every building had a deputy standing there, ready to secure the area, ready to respond. The fact that this guy was able to climb a roof, that is a total failure in my eyes.
There are just so many questions that remain more than a week later. Briefings from the FBI would later reveal that there was no apparent motive being ascribed to Crooks. He was registered as a Republican, but had donated
No
to a
apparent
progressive
motive.
cause. He didn't appear to have an allegiance to either political party, and it would later come to light that he had photos of former President Trump on his phone, but he also had photos of Joe Biden, House Speaker Mike Johnson, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, and even Attorney General Merrick Garland. It's also been reported that Crooks searched for the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. Crooks had registered for the Trump rally, and in a stunning development reported by the Wall Street Journal, Crooks actually flew a drone over the rally site hours before Mr. Trump took the stage at the Butler Farm Showgrounds. The website reported that Crooks flew the drone more than once as he researched the event. That is stunning. Typically, the airspace above an event involving a high-ranking dignitary would be kept clear of anything like that. And if anyone should have had a drone in the air, it should have been local law enforcement or the Secret Service. The security failure was the subject of a House oversight hearing on Capitol Hill, where Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle faced a tough grilling over her agency's handling or mishandling of security at the event.
Assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump on July 13th is the most significant operational failure of the Secret Service in decades, and I am keeping him and his family in my thoughts.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question. Yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible.
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure? Yes or no?
Yes.
You say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political. Yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bullshit.
The New York Times reported that
Yeah,
Crooks
she was
had actually
passing out the
asked his
storm.
bosses at the nursing home where he worked to have Saturday, July 13th off because he told them he had something important to do. After Crooks had scoped out the location of the rally, he returned to the site with his father's gun and homemade bombs that could be set off using a remote control. Crooks's parents had contacted police in the hours before the shooting. A briefing by the FBI to lawmakers revealed that Crooks had searched for major depressive disorder online, but possibly had never been diagnosed. The Daily Beast reported that before Crooks fired the shots, his last online search was for pornography. Experts say that's not unusual among people who carry out mass shootings. I'll have more on that later on. Those who knew Crooks from school or his neighborhood say he kept to himself.
He sat by himself.
They
didn't
said he
talk
took
to
it from
anyone,
Stack.
like didn't even try to make conversation. So it was just kind of odd. He was an odd kid, but I didn't like have any issues with him or anything.
There have been a lot of reports that Crooks was bullied, but a Fox News Digital story said those claims are not true, quoting a former student at Bethel Park High School who told the site, quote, "He didn't talk a lot, but when he was talked to, he would make good conversation. He was easy to talk to. He would make good conversation. He was very chill, very humble." Fox quoted the former girlfriend as saying Crooks had friends in class and on the bus. The people who knew him didn't have negative experiences with him. It's also been reported that he was studying mechanical engineering and had just completed an associate's degree and was heading to college in the fall. The world is not always a safe place, and when accidents happen, you might need an attorney that's going to fight for you and stand up for your rights. That's why I want to talk to you about Morgan & Morgan, a sponsor of Crime Fix. Morgan & Morgan has more than 1,000 attorneys you may want in your corner because they are America's largest injury firm, and for a reason, they win a lot. Morgan & Morgan has secured several multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements recently for victims who were in life-altering car crashes, all of which were considerably higher than the highest insurance offer. Starting a claim takes just 8 clicks or less, and it can all be done from your smartphone. And there are no upfront fees. You only pay Morgan & Morgan if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim in 8 clicks or less at forthepeople.com/crimefix. With me to discuss Thomas Crooks is somebody who's been following this case very closely. He's retired FBI agent Bobby Chacon. He's also an attorney. Bobby, I find this report in the Wall Street Journal incredibly interesting. The fact that Thomas Crooks was actually able to get a drone up in the air, according to the Wall Street Journal, to survey this area. It's shocking to me because I always thought the Secret Service goes in and they kind of shut these areas down. They do an assessment and they make sure that nobody is doing anything like that. So what are your thoughts on that report?
Well, I think mine are the same as yours. I'm a bit shocked that he was able to get a drone. Not that he was able to get a drone, but most 20-year-old young men can operate drones. And it's part of the culture now. But the fact that Secret Service didn't have that space locked down hours, if not days, in advance of a former president and now presidential candidate appearance there. And so I think that, they have to start looking into, very carefully into how they handle these things in the future. But yeah, it was shocking that the amount of access he had and the drone, fact that he was able to kind of gain more intelligence than they had apparently on this overall site, because I don't know if they ever had flown a drone over there. Certainly they didn't have one the day of the event, and I'm not sure they had one in the days leading up to it when they were putting their plan together.
Drones are pretty simple, as you mentioned. Any 20-year-old, I think a lot of 10-year-olds these days can operate a drone and get one up in the air. And I actually talked to a law enforcement officer that I know pretty well who told me, we send a drone up in the air for $100 drug deal for surveillance. So how on earth the Secret Service didn't have drones in the air and how this kid was able to get a drone up in the air is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, because you could have used it both to do the planning, like I said, in those now famous aerial shots we've seen of the site, and you can pick out that roof as one of the most vulnerable points just from the air. Just, if you're on the ground, it might look a little different, but certainly from the air, when you look at it on those aerial shots where the drone would have given them, you can see that roof as the closest, most dangerous point that an adversary might exploit. And then, of course, during the operation, that's leading up to it. And during the operation, if you had a drone up, you would have been able to see him immediately get on that roof, knowing he's not one of your team, and call for Trump to get off that stage immediately. Instead, they were relying on
basic
people.
idea now behind how to do it.
Famous videos, the woman's yelling, "He's got a gun, he's on the roof," and all these bystanders are trying to notify cops. Well, there's a lag time, there's a delay in the response there because of that. And so, to avoid that, if you had a drone up, just constantly an eye in the sky watching, the minute that he breached that roof and was crawling up there, they would have called it out. Trump would have been rushed off the stage, and the team could have been sent to respond to that threat. Instead, that did not happen, and we know the consequences.
There's another report out from the Daily Beast, and I found this interesting too. And it said that a law enforcement source told the Daily Beast that Thomas Crooks, his last internet search before this shooting was for pornography. And apparently the experts will tell you that that's not incredibly unusual. Even among school shooters and mass shooters, pornography is apparently a common factor or thread, the viewing of pornography among these people. Do you have any experience with that? Have you seen this in the past? And is there a strange kind of maybe a sexual frustration component with these people who carry out these mass shootings?
Yes, I mean, I spoke to, and I have some very good friends who are FBI profilers, former FBI profilers. They're retired now, and I spoke to them about this very topic. And one of their takes was, there's this incel community that's out there, and then there's kind of varying degrees of people that fall into that incel category, that involuntarily celibate category. In other words, these are guys that are, for whatever reason, the niches they were in middle school and high school prevented them from developing normal relationships with girls or whatever their sexual orientation is. And so they are involuntarily celibate. And, that there's a certain frustration that grows out of that. And the internet has given them a place to kind of commiserate on that. And they can't establish that normal romantic or physical relationships with their chosen
incels deserve representation.
Attracted to. And so they watch pornography, and that's their outlet for that. And so there were early reports that he might be an incel or one of these incel type.
Those early
people.
reports,
And
I thought
so
he was trans.
I'm sure that part of the FBI investigation, talking to his family, talking to his friends, did he ever have a girlfriend? Did he have a boyfriend? Did he ever have any relationship, physical or otherwise, with another person? And so I'm sure they're looking
I
into
didn't
that. But
catch
yeah,
any of that
that is
stuff
not an
there.
uncommon
I wouldn't be surprised,
category
though.
of people that engage in these kind of activities.
Involuntary celibate obviously means they don't want to be. It's just that they aren't
They don't
able
want
to,
to
for
be.
whatever reason, have a sexual relationship
Shout
with
out
somebody,
to my baby for
whether
making me this
it's
drink.
of the different sex, same sex, what have you. This guy's been described as a loner. That's not something uncommon that we hear among people who carry out these types of things. He was described as somebody in high school. He's only 20 years old when he carries this shooting out.
I didn't
But
hear anything like
he
that.
is somebody
That
who
is
was
fucked
described
up if they
as
are
in high
trying to
school
do
as being
that.
a loner. He was bullied, things
I
like
feel
that.
like this is like an
seems
independent
textbook
news source.
stereotypical type things for the way that this guy was described.
Yeah, absolutely. And what that does, how that impacts an individual like this is that when all of us who are not loners, say when we have a social circle or a network of friends or family that we normally talk to on a regular basis, it tends to moderate us a little bit. If we're going down an emotional or an intellectual highway that is not good for us or that is not based in reason, there's somebody there to kind of moderate that. There's somebody to kind of get us back on the road and talk to you, kind of makes you think differently. But if you're a loner and you go down one of these dark places, one of these roads, and there's nobody there in your social circle or your family circle because you're a loner, to moderate you and to moderate those views.
This guy might not have been a
Maybe
loner.
get you to think about things in a different way. Then you continue down that dark path, and without that network, without that social support, these loner types then tend to viciously go down and down and down and down that rabbit hole, and there's no one there to kind of moderate those views or to get them to think about things a little differently.
Do you think we'll ever know what motivated this guy? I mean, he had pictures of famous people. It wasn't just Trump. He had photos of Biden reportedly on his phone, Princess Kate, Fonnie Willis, all kinds of different people.
Yeah, and he also did searches for Biden and DNC and things like that. So, I don't know this to be true yet. They haven't made it public. I think that it could be one of those things where he was going to kill whoever was famous closest to him in those days when he chose to take out this attack because he wanted to be famous. One of these kill someone famous to become famous type things. Like maybe like Mark Chapman, who killed John Lennon and things like that. So yeah, it could be that. Unfortunately, because he's deceased, his true motivations 100% we'll never know. But we are going to be able to hand all the information off, which I'm sure they're doing now, to our profilers, and who will kind of come up with a most likely motive. We'll never know for sure, but I think they will be able to come up with a most likely motive. And the reason that's important is because you want to maybe keep an eye on similarly situated or similarly thinking individuals, so that maybe people he may have commiserated with on the internet, so that they may be talked to, they may be kind of veered off of that path that no one veered him off of. So I think we'll have a most likely motive based on a whole totality of circumstances situation, but I don't know if we'll ever truly know without a doubt 100%, because like I said, he's deceased. He took that with him, and it doesn't seem like he had anybody that he was regularly talking to about these things.
Thank you, Bobby.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.
Nice.
Hello, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I want to address something Tom just said, which is, in fact, that woke is supposed to advance equity in Europe. So here's the definition of equity, and see if it sounds like a definition of anything else you've ever heard of. The definition of equity comes from the public administration literature. It was written by a man named George Frederickson. And the definition is an administered political economy in which shares are adjusted so that citizens are made equal. Does that sound like anything you've heard of before? Like socialism? They're going to administer an economy to make shares equal. The only difference between equity and socialism is the type of property that they redistribute, the type of shares. They're going to redistribute social and cultural capital in addition to economic and material capital. And so this is my thesis when we say, what is woke? Woke is Maoism with American characteristics, if I might borrow from Mao himself, who said that his philosophy was Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristics, which means woke is Marxism. And it's a very provocative statement. It's something you will certainly hear it is not, that it is different. And the professors and the philosophers will spend a large amount of time explaining to you why, no, it's about economics when it's Marxism. This is social, this is cultural, this is different. It's not different. I need you to think biologically for one moment, and I don't mean about your bodies. We could do that. That's a different topic. I want you to think how we organize plants and animals when we study them. There's species, but above species, there are the genus of the animals. So you think like the cats, all the cats, but you have tigers, you have lions, you have house cats, you have whatever, leopards, many different kinds of cats. If we think of Marxism as a genus of ideological thought, then classical economic Marxism is a species. Radical feminism is a species in this same genus. Critical race theory is a species in this genus. Queer theory is a species in this genus. Post-colonial theory that's plaguing Europe is a species in this genus. And they have something that binds them together called intersectionality that makes them treated as if they are all one thing. But the logic is Marxist. And I want to convince you of that because Marx had a very simple proposition, but we get lost. We think that Marx was talking about economics because he often talked about economics. He wrote a book called Capital. It's a very famous book. And we think, well, this is about economic theory, but this isn't true. It's only true on the surface. If we go below the surface, what Marx was talking about was something different. We know what Marx's hypothesis was that we must seize the means of production if we're going to bring socialism to the nations, to the world. We have to seize the means of production. So we have to ask, what does he mean? And if we think that it's about capital, then we miss what he means. If you think it's about the means of production in the factory with a hammer and the means of production in the field with a sickle, then you miss what it means. Because Marx explained what makes human beings special in his earlier writings. And what makes human beings special is that man is a being that is incomplete and knows that he is incomplete. He is a man whose true nature has been forgotten to him, which is
Correct your spelling a lot.
being. He is a socialist at heart who doesn't realize it. And the reason he doesn't realize it is because of the economic conditions operating as the means of construction or production, not just of the economy, but of him, but of man, of society, and particularly of history. Marx said that he had the first scientific study of history. How was history produced? By man, doing man's activity, and man's key activity was economic activity, as he saw it. And so economic production doesn't just produce the goods and services of the economy, it produces society itself. And society in turn produces man. He called this the inversion of praxis. And so when he says we must seize the means of production, and he's talking about factories and fields, he's actually talking about how we construct who we are as human beings so that we might complete ourselves, so that we might complete history. And at the end of history, mankind will remember that he is a social being, and we will have a socialist society, a perfect communism that transcends private property, is how he put it. He said, in fact, that communism is the transcendence of private property as human self-estrangement. That's a quote from the Economic Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844. So Marx was interested in controlling or understanding and controlling how man produces himself. And he writes about this exclusively in the 1840s, very deeply. How do we do this? And he looks at the economic conditions and he says, this is where it is. And that's why we get economic Marxism. And that's why we think Marx was an economist. But Marx was never an economist. He was a theologian. He wanted to produce a religion for mankind that would supersede all of the religions of mankind and bring him back to his true social nature. And this is the true fact of Marx. And what the goal was, like I said, is to complete man. So what he said is, well, how are we building man currently? All of his economic analysis is about how are we building man at present through what he called material determinism. And he said, well, what we have is a special form of private property in our society. Our society is organized around private property. And so all of our thoughts organize around private property. In other words, there's a special kind of property that the bourgeois elite class has access to, and then they organize society to exclude everybody else from access to that property through exploitation, through alienation, through estrangement, through oppression. And so what Karl Marx was proposing is that economics becomes a vehicle to
It was
separate
storming so
society
bad
into
here,
a
everything
bourgeois
was
class
flooded.
that has
The
access
homes,
to
the
a special
yards,
form of
all
property.
everything.
The people who have access wish to retain that, so they oppress people and keep other people out of that special form of property. They erect a system of classism to do that. It's enforced by an ideology called capitalism that believes that this is the right way to engage in the world. And what we have to do is awaken the underclass, the proletariat, to the real conditions and the fact that they are historical agents of change, and bring them to do a revolution and transform society so that we would have equity or socialism, whichever word you want. They have the same definition. Now, let's say that we step out. We step back from this species, this economic species, Homo economicus, and we step back to the genus, and we look at this idea, a special form of property that segregates society into people who have, the bourgeois, and the people who do not have, who are in class conflict with an ideology that keeps this in place. And the underclass must awaken with consciousness to fight back and to seize the means of production of that form of deterministic property. And now we say, change out class, put in race, and watch, we get critical race theory falls out of the hat, just like that. Very simple. In 1993, Cheryl Harris wrote a long article for the Harvard Law Review called Whiteness is Property. She explained that whiteness or white privilege constitutes a kind of cultural private property. She says it must be abolished in order to have racial justice. Just like Karl Marx said that in the Communist Manifesto, he wrote, communism can be summarized in a single sentence, the abolition of private property. Well, this is why critical race theory calls to abolish whiteness, because whiteness is a form of private property.
And once
People
they
who have
abolish
access
whiteness, they'll
to this
abolish all
property
free
are
critical
whites
thinking
or
and
white
intelligence.
adjacent, or they act white. These are words out of the American lexicon that they've used to describe how people gain access to the private property. People without that are people of color, and they are oppressed by systemic racism. Systemic racism is enforced by an ideology of white supremacy instead of capitalism. If you think of whiteness as a form of cultural capital, white supremacy, as they define it, is identical to capitalism. It's the belief, it's not believing that white people are superior. It's believing that white people have access to the control of society and should maintain that, even if you don't actually believe that. If you merely support that, you have adopted the ideology of white supremacy into your mind. And so you have the exact same system. And the goal is to awaken a racial consciousness in people so that they will band together as a class and seize the means of cultural production so that white cultural production is no longer the dominant mode. It's a big mystery in Europe, I know, in the UK, throughout Europe, I hear this question again and again. Why on earth is this very American phenomenon about slavery and so on that doesn't apply to our country? Why is it popular here? It's because it's not about history at all. It's not about slavery at all. Those are excuses that they use. It's about creating a class consciousness that's against this form of property called whiteness, that's against the dominant culture that may just be a matter of fact, say here in Europe.
Or not.
That's why. Because it becomes a site by which people can come together and they can channel resentment and try to claim power. I wrote a book called Race Marxism, and I defined critical race theory as it really is in that book on the first page. I said that critical race theory is calling everything you want to control racist until you control it. But couldn't we say the same about Marxism? It's calling everything you want to control bourgeois until you control it. But those mean the same thing.
That was actually pretty good.
They mean exactly the same thing. But what about, say, queer theory? How is that Marxist? It's very strange, all this gender and sex and sexuality. Well, Tom said, what does woke attack? The idea of being normal. Well, the queer theory thinks that there are certain people who get to set the norms of society. They are privileged. They call themselves normal. They say this is normal. It's normal to consider yourself a man and look like a man and act like a man and dress like a man and eat meat like a man. And then there are women this should be feminine and pretty and all these things. And so they get to define what's normal. They're heterosexuals, so they get to define the heterosexuality as normal and other sexualities are abnormal. And so you have a conflict across this cultural property of who gets to be considered normal and who is a pervert or a freak or some other term that gets used in their literature. But technically, who is a queer, which sounds like a slur, but they adopted it and it's a technical academic term now. It means an identity without an essence, by the way, an identity that is strictly oppositional to the concept of the normal, as defined by queer theorist David Halperin in his 1995 book, Saint Foucault, Toward a Gay Hagiography. I didn't make that up. I'm not extrapolating. So you see, queer theory is just another species of the genus of Marxism. What about post-colonial theory, which is plaguing Europe, thanks to Frantz Fanon and his biggest European fan, Jean-Paul Sartre? What about this? Well, it's the same. You have the West as the oppressor. They have access to the material and cultural wealth of the world because they've decided their culture is the default and have gone and colonized the world to bring culture to the world, as they say. And so the oppressed, the natives around the world, the people have to band together, and their activity is going to be called decolonization. They have to remove every aspect of Western culture. So when they come to Belgium or they come to France or they come to the United States and they say we're going to decolonize the curriculum, or they go to the UK and say we're going to decolonize Shakespeare, this is what they mean. We're going to remove the cultural significance of your cultural artifacts because those cultural artifacts themselves are oppressive to us. This is the same system. It's another species in the exact same genus. And that genus is Marxism, which is a way of thinking about the world. And the goal is always to seize the means of control of the production of man and history and society. Marx merely believed it was through economic means. Now it's through socio-cultural means. The evolution into this sometimes called Western Marxism began in the 1920s. We had a Russian Revolution in 1917, and this did not happen in Europe. And the Marxists in Europe were confused. And so Antonio Gramsci sat down and wrote out some things. And George Lukács sat down and wrote History and Class Consciousness after the failure of the revolution in Hungary. And they wrote what became cultural Marxism. The idea that we have to enter the cultural institutions in order to change them from within, because Western culture has something about it that's repelling socialism. So we have to go inside and change the culture to make it socialist. Now, you aren't allowed to talk about cultural Marxism now. They've categorized this as a conspiracy theory. They say that it is anti-Semitic. This is not true. Antonio Gramsci wrote books. George Lukács wrote books. You can read those books. They have a philosophy. If they don't like the name cultural Marxism, we can use the name that other people at the time used, Western Marxism. So much like I don't know, a virus adapting to the conditions. It changed to try to infect a new host. It worked in feudal societies. Marxism took over in Russia. It took over later in China. It took over in all of these kind of agriculturally driven feudal societies, but it wouldn't work in actual capitalist nations because Marx was wrong. Then several Germans from the Frankfurt School started to study this phenomenon in more depth, and they evolved the idea further. They evolved the idea into what's called critical Marxism. They developed what's called the critical theory. And Max Horkheimer, who designed the critical theory, explained the critical theory. And what did he say? He said, well, what we came to realize was that Marx was wrong about one thing. Capitalism does not immiserate the worker. It allows him to build a better life. So I developed the critical theory because it is not possible to articulate the vision of a good society on the terms of the existing society. So critical Marxism criticizes the entirety of the existing society. Everything is somehow needing to be subjected to Marxist conflict analysis. But how is that to be done? They sought an answer through the middle part of the 20th century, and World War II breaks out. The Frankfurt School comes to America, which in this metaphor is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, because gain of function began to happen on the Marxist virus very quickly in America. And American universities adopted these professors from Germany. And Herbert Marcuse writing in the 1960s, said extremely clearly, this writing in 1969, not only did he say capitalism delivers the goods, gives people a good life, makes them wealthy and comfortable and happy, he also said that the working class is no longer going to be the base of the revolution because of these things. In other words, we don't have to be responsible to the working class anymore, which opens up the ability for Marxists who are seeking power to make friends with the corporations. The bosses are no longer the enemy, they're an opportunity because the working class is irrelevant. He said the energy is somewhere else. He said it's in the racial minorities, the sexual minorities, the feminists, the outsiders. That's who he said have the energy for a Marxist revolution in the West, not the working class. And so Marxism was able to evolve to abandon the working class. And so what did they do? Well, all they had studied for 30 years was what they called the culture industry. An industry that commodifies and packages culture and sells it back to people. So supposedly stripped of what it actually is, empty, abstract now. And so what, of course, did they do? They seized the means of production of the culture industry because that's what they do. And so they started to transform the culture industry to sell racial, sexual, gender, sexuality-based agitprop as though that were genuine culture. And so we get concepts like cultural appropriation. We get concepts like cultural relevance, cultural this, cultural that, cultural everything. And it's all provided in pastiche. It's all provided as a mockery of what's really going on. And this evolved in America's highly racialized context. And we ended up with woke, a form of identity-based Marxism, a constellation of Marxist species that all work with the same operating premise, but locate themselves in different, and I'll use the German term here for this, folk. LGBTQ is a folk. And they get folkish identity there and become activists. The Black community is a folk. How do I know? That's what W.E.B. Du Bois said it would be when he laid down the foundations that became critical race theory later.
What up, G-Mon
They
Nana?
think of themselves as nations. Don't they all have flags? Don't they put them on your buildings like colonizers? Don't they hang them in your streets? They think of themselves as occupying nations, but they see themselves as bound together, just like the various colonized nations around the world, in seeking liberation from Western civilization. And so we end up with Western Marxism taking many forms, but with one overarching approach. And the approach that they use, I started off by saying, is Maoist, not merely Marxist. Now you know the theory is Marx. It's just evolved into different species to attack the West at its weakest points through our tolerance, through our acceptance, through our openness, through our generosity, through our best traits, actually. The things that we should be proud of being, the things that we are proud of being. But Mao Zedong knew how to use identity politics. I don't know how you study in Europe, but in America, we have very red-washed education, as we might say. The communists have stripped out all education about communism entirely. You don't learn about it in America at all. So we don't learn anything about Mao. And maybe you don't know this, but I tell this to American audiences and they're shocked. Mao used identity politics. He created 10 identities in China. 5, he labeled red for communist. 5, he labeled black for fascist. And he categorized people into these identity categories. What they are doesn't really matter. Of course, they were communists. They were things like landlord and rich farmer and things like this. Right-winger is a bad category in and of itself, by the way. Conservative, all of them, bad. Bad influences, that's another one. You could be a bad influence for just thinking the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing at any time, or because the government decides it doesn't like you. These are the bad categories. And if you have a bad category, very importantly, your children have a bad category by default. So they create a social pressure for your children to identify as revolutionaries, at which point they get a red identity, a communist identity, a good identity, and they get rewarded for it. And the youth led the revolution in China because Mao did this, identity politics through the children in the schools.
This is just some
It should be
dude
very
giving
uncomfortable
a
to you.
speech
Because
to
here
Europe
we have,
about what's
at
going
least in the
on
United
with their whole
States, we tell our
immigration
children
situation.
being white is bad. Being white is oppressive. You automatically hurt people of other races by your very existence. But by the way, if you become queer, we'll celebrate you. And you can create a radical army of people who identify as gender minorities and sexual minorities at 7 years old. You can lead them into paths of puberty blockers and transition, medical transition, which of course Big Pharma profits off of. At 7 years old, behind their parents' back. There's a reason for this. It's the same program that Mao Zedong used to radicalize the youth in China. The only thing different is the identity categories have shifted. It's Maoist cultural revolution with American characteristics, and it's being exported to Europe. And just like how critical race theory has come to Europe, even though it doesn't make sense, it will come to Europe, whether it makes sense or not, and you will have a cultural revolution here too. You guys even had a kind of offshoot one in 2020. George Floyd dies in Minnesota, which has nothing to do with you. And you guys have statues coming down in Europe. Total nonsense. It doesn't matter though. The point is to destroy Western civilization from within using Maoist techniques. One last point about Mao to kind of drive that point home. Mao said in 1942 that his formula to transform China was called unity, criticism, unity. First, you try to create the desire for unity. Then you criticize people for not living up to that. Then you bring them into unity under a new standard. Does that feel like what you're being put through? But the words are different. We use words like inclusion and belonging. We'll have a place where everybody feels like they belong. We just want to have an inclusive space. But unfortunately, you have racist ideas and you have to criticize we have to criticize you for those. You need to criticize yourself for those. You need to go study Shuishi in Mandarin, exactly like Mao said. And then we can bring you into unity under a new standard, which Mao called socialist discipline, which we in the West would not buy. We call it in the West inclusion. And so we have this new program, and within inclusion we have, or above inclusion actually, we have sustainability. We have a sustainable and inclusive future. I see the Agenda 2030 here with an X over it. The sustainable and inclusive future is the new socialist standard, that we will have freedom under socialist discipline. And Mao said the way that that will work is through what he called democratic centralism. We call that stakeholder capitalism. And my shot at the World Economic Forum is taken because it's one of the things coordinating this. My shot at the United Nations is taken because it's one of the things that's coordinating this. So woke is Marxism. It's advancing through Maoist cultural revolution. It's using Americanized identity categories. And while some of those will not work in Europe, I guarantee you the colonial aspect will. They will find your weakness. They will adapt the theory to fit because it's like a virus that will evolve to its host. And Europe is at great risk. Now, the last thing I'll mention is this risk is twofold. When you endure Marxist provocation, Marxist strategy is always of the same type. It's called middle-level violence. They don't come at you with full-blown Bolshevik assault very often. It's middle-level violence. They provoke, which means if you give in and you do like Jean-Paul Sartre said in his foreword to The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, the post-colonial book, he said, the violence is coming. So Europe's best bet is to give it away so that they don't kill you. They'll murder you and take it, or maybe you can give it away, give your culture away, give your countries away, and they'll let you live. They're coming for you. And this is what Europe needs to learn. That's what he says in the foreword of Wretched of the Earth. You can read it for yourself, probably in the original French that I can't read. And I think that's the path Europe has followed. So you can give away, that's one side, because they provoke at the middle. Or you can react and overreact, which sadly Europe has had a rough history in the last century with overreactions. And if you overreact, what will they do? They will weaponize your overreaction for a century, forever, and gain moral authority so that you end up having to give it away later anyway. So you have to stand firm in your principles, but you have to do so cleverly. You have to do so understanding that you're being provoked, which means you don't react as the provocateur wants you to
Dionysus is
react.
still some
You
devilish
have
shit.
to
Another
outsmart them, which is not possible
term
unless you
for
know the
Satan
diagnosis
is
of your problem.
Dionysus.
It's a Polish proverb, never attempt to cure what you don't understand. Woke is Marxism, evolved to attack the West. If you don't understand that, you will not act correctly. You will not cure it, and it will conquer your countries. It will conquer all of Europe, and we will have a very, very long, sustainable, and inclusive future with absolutely no freedom. Because the goal is to make us into what they call global citizens. Have you heard this term? This term is nonsense. There's no global sovereign, so there is no global citizenship. There's no relationship because there's no ruler, and we don't want a ruler of the globe. It's a nonsense term. But they tell you, if you actually read their literature, what is a global citizen? It's somebody, I kid you not, I make no joke. They say this themselves. It's somebody who supports the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations Agenda 2030. That's a global citizen. And they say, what are the rights of a global citizen? This is in a book about global citizenship education published 2 years ago. What are the rights of a global citizen? And the answer, one paragraph later, is we're not that interested in rights with global citizenship. It's more about global responsibilities. In other words, slavery. This is a pivotal moment in the history of the Western world. The model that they are pushing us toward, using the means and mechanisms of that place, is the model we see in China. If you want to know what your future looks like if we don't stop the woke, look at China. Look at the social credit system. Look at the oppression. Look at people disappearing for having the wrong opinions. One of their greatest billionaires, Jack Ma, said the wrong thing about the government and disappeared. A billionaire. If you want to know what the future of Europe and America and the Five Eyes or whatever the countries, it's China. That's the model. So we have to fight back against woke, but to fight back against woke, we have to understand it. And I will close by restating my thesis. Woke as Marxism evolved to take on the West. And it's been very successful so far because we haven't known our enemy. We cannot name our enemy. And I've come here to name our enemy. So thank you for your time and attention and letting me do that.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see what else we can find on here.
Harris looks to be a shoo-in for the Democratic nomination, following Joe Biden's dramatic exit from the race. But many commentators are saying Kamala Harris is no better than Joe Biden when her litany of fumbles, mumbles, and gaffes are examined. Sky News All-Stars Rita Panahi, Danica DiGiorgio, and Megyn Kelly take a look at Kamala's cringiest moments.
That guy was speaking
Kamala
straight
Harris
up
may
truth.
well
If
be
I
an
find his
election
name
away
out, I'll
from
let you
being
guys
the
know.
leader of the free world. But instead of knuckling down and getting serious, the Veep is as cringy as ever.
It is so good to hear our president's voice. Joe, I know you're still on the call, and we've been talking every day. You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching you, kid. I'm watching you, kid. I love you.
I love you, Joe. Oh.
Sky News All-Star Rita Panahi blasted Kamala Harris for her incompetence and idiocy.
Yes, that's Kamala Harris, the inept, radically left and wildly unpopular vice president, who is now being presented as the Democrats' great hope. The woman who has not won a single presidential primary. A Californian from San Francisco with a voting record in the Senate that is radically left. She's disliked by her own, let alone the average American. And pollsters, including Matt Towery, are already laying bare how unpopular Kamala is in the crucial swing states. The polling shows she's even less popular than Biden among independents in those swing states. Indeed, across America, Kamala has proven to be less popular than the least popular president of our time. She has consistently lied to the American people about Biden's cognitive decline, and millions of Americans gave their primary vote to Biden. Their votes mean nothing tonight.
She also goes on to slam the Democrats for threatening democracy, despite labeling Donald Trump as a threat to democracy.
And millions of Americans gave their primary vote to Biden. Their votes mean nothing tonight. The Democrats have shown again and again, though they bleat endlessly about threats to democracy, they care little about democracy. They have weaponized the justice system to try to imprison their chief political rival. And now they're going to ignore the votes of 14 million Americans who voted for Biden in the Democratic primary. And they'll install Kamala as the candidate.
Sky News contributor Megyn Kelly agrees, saying Kamala Harris is a fool and she won't win the popular vote.
I'm sorry to be ad hominem, but she's a fool. She's not a smart person. If you listen to her, as I have now for so many years, you glean that she is faking it. She thinks she's Oprah with her attempts at profundity that never land. We will be unburdened by what has been. It's her only line. She says it all the time. Her other line is about Venn diagrams, which is equally stupid. And her attempt to take complex topics and reduce them down into small, digestible bits is the most offensive to me, because that happens to be what I do for a living, what you, Paul, do for a living. And it does actually take some skill and some research and some knowledge. You have to learn it forward and backward before you can explain it in a very easy to understand way to your audience. She doesn't get it. It doesn't require speaking to people like they're four, but that's her level of communication. So that person's not going to be the first female president. It's not going to happen. I would bet everything I have on it. The only way it's happening is the Democrat machine. And let's face it, some potential shenanigans at the voter box. You know, last time around, you don't have to believe that they switched votes like with Dominion or Smartmatic to believe that there was cheating. Just look what they did in Pennsylvania, where they changed the rules and you can do all this mail-in balloting for a month beforehand, which we had never had before. Who's receiving those votes? Who's accepting those votes? Those votes can be received even if they weren't postmarked by Election Day. That's one way we know they manipulated the last election, and they're really good at it. So that's her best shot, but the overwhelming odds are against her.
And in the lead up to the Democratic convention, Sky News All-Star Danica DiGiorgio has exposed Kamala Harris's cringiest moments.
Now it's time for lefties losing it, starting with the bumbling, bizarre, broken record, Kamala Harris, and her strange and quite frankly abnormal obsession with repeating the same lines over and over and over and over.
This is going to be a humbling thing I'm about to share with you. If someone is 18 years old today, they were born in 2005. I love Gen Z. I love Gen Z. It will be a humbling moment for some of us to realize that anyone who is 18 now was born in 2005. I love Gen Z. I love Gen Z. So think about this. Okay, first of all, it's going to be humbling for many of us when you remember or realize that someone who is 18 now was born in 2005. I have to tell you, I love Gen Z. Yes, I know, but I love Gen Z. And it will be a humbling fact to many of us when we realize that anyone who is 18 today, they were born in 2005.
My humble apologies to Gen Z and anyone born in 2005. And even more apologies to Americans who could soon be burdened by what might be.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know?
What can be unburdened by what has been. 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 What we can see, what we believe can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Who we can be unburdened by who we have been. Even the same arm every time. Can someone please unburden me from the shackles of that video?
And Rita Panahi added to the cringe fest.
And it's the wildly unpopular and incompetent Kamala
You think
Harris
Montel Williams
who's right now seen as their best
You think
chance.
she ever agree with Montel Williams?
this one.
Did he?
Mayonesa Hellmann's
tiene un sabor irresistible. Es tan rica y cremosa. Regresa un domingo.
We all watched the television coverage of just yesterday. That's on top of everything else that we know and don't know yet, based on what we've just been able to see. And because we've seen it or not doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But just limited to what we have seen.
She highlighted Kamala's ineptitude when it comes to foreign policy.
And don't ever have Kamala try to explain international conflicts.
Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
That's wrong, yes it is. And by the way, she was speaking to adults there. It wasn't some discussion with fourth graders.
And she also mocked the VP's pronoun obsession.
At least she didn't tell them her, I don't know, pronouns.
Good afternoon. I want to welcome these leaders for coming in to have this very important discussion about some of the most pressing issues of our time. I am Kamala Harris. My pronouns are she and her. I am a woman sitting at the table wearing a blue suit.
And Rita Panahi then went on to expose Kamala Harris's dire debating skills, which have hopefully improved if she's going to go head-to-head with Donald Trump.
And if you're wondering why she's never won a presidential primary, well, here's a reminder.
Vice President have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's just let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. You got a
And
constitution.
yes, we can, because he reminds me of that guy in The Wizard of Oz. You know, when you pull back the curtain, it's a really small dude.
Okay.
And who can forget this
Ukraine,
moment when Tulsi Gabbard demolished Kamala?
I believe it is
on her
technically in
rotten
Europe
record.
geographically.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her
It's an
record
European
as a
step.
prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record.
The
There
way
are too
that
many
she was saying it
examples
did
to cite,
sound
but
kind of stupid.
She put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor
This
people in the
Congresswoman
worst
right
kind
here.
of way.
And Danica DiGiorgio mocked Kamala Harris's obsession with time travel.
Now to Kamala's part-time obsession with time travel.
To see the moment in time in which we exist. During Women's History Month, we celebrate and we honor the women who made history, the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time. It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
You know, this time travel thing has really got me into a spin.
Sky News All-Star Alex Stein controversially believes even people on the left don't want a female president.
You know, Rita, I want to be like Vivek and I want to be honest. Even people on the left, I feel, are a little misogynistic. And I know that sounds crazy, but I do believe people even on the left are not going to want a woman president. I don't think people mind having a woman vice president, but I think, you know, a lot of gay men are. What is that crazy to say that? A lot of people are not going to want a female president. It's like one of the reasons why.
Crazy.
Well, Hillary Clinton is. That's the reason why.
Crazy.
Well, what? That I think that people don't want a female president.
So unlikable. I think if they put up a female who was actually accomplished and likable and electable, she would have won. But they put up Hillary, and now they've got Kamala. It's like they're determined to make the female presidential candidates fail.
Well, they have to kind of cheat, you know. She's going to be the president by default because all.
Let's listen to this guy explain what deep state is. Let me see what's up.
All right, we have a special treat right now. We got Mike Benz with us on the show. I keep referring to his interview with Tucker Carlson. Today, I've had to listen. I listened to it 4 times last.
I don't want to listen to somebody else's shit. I only want to watch documentaries with you guys. Let's see what this has to say.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
The fuck this is? Shout out Mr. Truth Bomb. Truth Bomb. Oh shit, I hope my channel don't get deleted.
So, the official narrative of the mainstream media in the West is that Russia is challenging NATO and the international rules-based order by invading Ukraine. This narrative seizes on Russia's 2014 annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula as a starting point for United States-Russian relations, and as evidence of Putin's goals of rebuilding Russia's long-lost empire.
Ukraine's independence came in 1991. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and as it splintered, a number of new nations emerged. Ukraine was one of the largest. Its population was 52 million. It was 1,200 kilometers from east to west, and with that land came a huge farming sector worth over $20 billion now, or close to 15 billion pounds. And as democracy moved east, this was a moment of optimism. In 1991, Ukrainians celebrated their first election. The US called it momentous. One voter described a flowering of our soul. But for all the enthusiasm, democracy couldn't change Ukraine's geography or its history. To the east was Russia. To the west was Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary. All three had communist past. By 2004, all three had joined the European Union. Being pro-Russia or pro-Europe became a fundamental dividing line in Ukrainian politics. And months later, we saw how. Amidst allegations of electoral fraud, what became known as the Orange Revolution began. And two men were the focus. Viktor Yanukovych, who was pro-Russia and who'd initially been declared the winner, and Viktor Yushchenko, here on the right, who was pro-Europe and would become president after a new vote. And while the outcome of that election was settled, relations with Russia were not. In 2010, there was a further twist. Yanukovych was re-elected, and then in 2013, he would take a decision with huge ramifications. Chris Morris reported at the time.
As EU leaders arrived for the Eastern Partnership Summit, something was missing. The centerpiece was supposed to have been the signing of an association agreement with Ukraine.
But it didn't happen. Under pressure from Russia, Yanukovych walked away from that deal with the EU, and another revolution would begin.
The Washington Post recently asked, why is there tension between Russia and Ukraine? Here is its answer. In March 2014, Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. A month later, war erupted between Russian allied separatists and Ukraine's military in the eastern Ukrainian region of Donbass. The United Nations Human Rights Office estimates that more than 13,000 people have been killed. But that account is highly misleading, because in nearly every case reported by the mainstream media, they have omitted the United States' extensive role in the 2014 coup that preceded Russia's annexation of Crimea. Focusing on just the latter part, the annexation of Crimea, only serves to manufacture consent for United States intervention abroad, and for tougher sanctions on Russia. The backdrop to the 2014 coup and annexation cannot be understood without looking at the United States' strategy to open Ukrainian markets to foreign investors and give control of its economy to giant multinational corporations. A key tool for this has been the International Monetary Fund, which leverages aid loans to push governments to adopt policies friendly to foreign investors. The IMF is funded by and represents Western financial capital and governments, and has been at the forefront of efforts to reshape economies around the world for decades, often with disastrous results. The civil war in Yemen and the coup in Bolivia.
Can you guys see the documentary pretty good still if I play it like this?
Both followed a rejection of IMF terms.
Or do we need to go back this way? Press 1 for this way, or press 2 for this way, please. Let me know. 1 for this.
In Ukraine, the IMF had long planned to implement a series of economic reforms to make the country more attractive to investors. In 2013, after early steps to integrate with the West, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych turned against these changes and ended trade integration talks with the European Union. Months before his overthrow, he restarted economic negotiations with Russia, in a major snub to the Western economic sphere. By then, the nationalist protests were heating up that would go on to topple his government. During this tug-of-war between the deep state and Russia, the Americans were engaged in a destabilization campaign against the Yanukovych government. After the 2014 coup, the new government quickly restarted the EU deal. The campaign culminated with the overthrow of the elected president in the Maidan Revolution, also known as the Maidan coup or the Maidan Massacre, named for the Kiev square that hosted the bulk of the protests.
И первые выступления массовые начались 21 числа, 21 ноября. Сначала акции проходили мирно. На эти акции пришли люди разной категории. Это были молодые и пожилые люди. Приходили с детьми. Явно было понятно, что с их стороны есть доверие к власти, в том числе и к правоохранителям. Потому что свободно выходили, и никаких намеков на то, что будет в отношении этих манифестантов приниматься какие-то меры воздействия, силовые и так далее, просто не существовало. Значит, соответственно, на охрану общественного порядка выходили правоохранители без огнестрельного оружия. Но среди митингующих уже замечены нами радикалы, которые относились к правым партиям, неофашистским организациям. И 24 числа, 24 ноября, они осуществили первую агрессивную акцию. – 24 числа первое было нападение на кабинет министров и первое нападение на сотрудников правоохранителей, которые охраняли. Второе нападение на правоохранителей службы безопасности Украины произошло 25 числа. Затем небезызвестные события 30 числа.
November 30th of 2013 became the first turning point of Euromaidan, and one of its most reported and mysterious events.
Я тогда немножко вот расскажу, как видел эти события я. Был звонок мне от Попова, глава администрации.
They've been at war there for a long
Говорил,
time.
что давайте вот сегодня там, мы хотели бы завозить оборудование для новогодней елки на площадь. Я ему объяснил, что до тех пор, пока люди находятся на площади, то этого делать нельзя. В районе часа ночи, когда вот массовые люди начали расходиться, разъезжаться, значит, я поговорил по телефону с руководителем службы безопасности Украины и спросил его точку зрения по развитию событий. Он сказал, ну, я считаю, что, слава богу, все закончилось. Вот вся информация идет о том, что все закончилось. Потому что фактически с 21 числа, ну, я вот в кабинете просто жил и спал там какое-то время, может быть, там 2 часа в сутки удавалось поспать. Около 3 часов ночи я приехал тоже к себе домой. Завел часы на 6:30 утра, включил телевизор сразу же, когда проснулся. Он у меня был настроен на 5-й канал. И 5-й канал демонстрирует большое количество скорой помощи. И там побитые люди.
After riot, police attacked peaceful protesters with clubs.
Happened in the early morning hours. The eyewitnesses that were there said that the police did use truncheons.
Меня, честно говоря, пробил просто холодный пот.
Моя первая реакция на то, что Майдан пострадал от действий полиции, была мгновенной. Нужно было расследовать, кто дал приказ разгонять митингующих, применять к ним силу. Я был противник того, чтобы к митингующим применялась сила, нарушали права людей.
Решений таких Попов самостоятельно принимать просто не мог. А кто для него был самый высокий руководитель? Для Попова был самый большой руководитель, это глава администрации. Сергей Владимирович Левочкин.
Coincidentally, Sergei Lovochkin is a close associate to many U.S. politicians. The security service of Ukraine had evidence that on that night, Lovochkin was in contact with opposition leader Yatsenyuk, where they discussed the clearing of Maidan on the pretext of installing the annual Christmas tree. News media reported that the riot police cruelly attacked the students peacefully sleeping in their tents, but scenes from the event seem to tell a different story. It appears that the protesters were waiting for the police. Additionally, there were dozens of journalists and cameramen from all the new public TV news outlets prepared to cover the events. And most ominously, a group of well-trained young men arrived to Maidan almost simultaneously with the riot police. They infiltrated the crowd and began provocations with insults, stones,
Real-time, the end of the world, Matrix attacking us.
As political turmoil engulfed the country in the lead up to 2014, the United States was fueling anti-government sentiment through mechanisms like USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, just as they had done in 2004's Color Revolution. In December 2013, Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs and a longtime regime change advocate, said that the United States government had spent $5 billion promoting democracy in Ukraine since 1991. The money went towards supporting senior officials in the Ukraine government, members of the business community as well as opposition civil society, who agree with United States goals.
The world is watching the drama that is unfolding in the center of Kyiv. The Euromaidan movement has come to embody the principles and values that are the cornerstones for all free democracies. What began on November 24th as a protest against President Yanukovych's decision to pause on the route to Europe has become much deeper and bigger. After blood was spilled by security forces on November 30th, the movement also became about justice and civil rights. Later that same day, I spent more than 2 hours with President Yanukovych. It was a tough conversation, but also a realistic one. But I also made clear that the United States believes there is a way out for Ukraine, that it is still possible to save Ukraine's European future, and that is where we wanted to see the president lead his country. And that was going to require immediate steps to de-escalate the security situation and immediate political steps to end the crisis and get Ukraine back into a conversation with Europe and with the International Monetary Fund. The reforms that the IMF insists on are necessary for the long-term economic health of the country. A new deal with the IMF would also send a positive signal to private markets and would increase foreign direct investment that is so urgently needed in Ukraine. Signing the association agreement with the EU would also put Ukraine on a path to strengthening the sort of stable and predictable business environment that investors require. There is no other path that would bring Ukraine back to long-term political stability and economic growth. As Vice President Biden said in remarks last night, President Yanukovych has a choice. He can choose the path that leads to division and isolation, or he can take a leap and take immediate, tangible steps to defuse his country's crisis and start a genuine dialogue with the opposition and agree on a path that returns Ukraine to economic and political health.
They've been trying to find peace there.
Since Ukraine's independence in 1991, the United States has supported Ukrainians as they build democratic skills and institutions, as they promote civic participation and good governance, all of which are preconditions for Ukraine to achieve its European aspirations. We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine.
The NED is a key organization in the network of American soft power that pours $170 million a year into organizations dedicated to defending or installing United States-friendly regimes. The Washington Post's David Ignatius once wrote that the organization functions by doing in public what the CIA used to do in private. The NED targets governments who oppose United States military or economic policy, stirring up anti-government opposition. One of the many recipients of NED money for projects in Ukraine was the International Republican Institute. The IRI, once chaired by Senator John No Name McCain, has long had a hand in United States regime change operations.
No Name McCain.
We see here that the IRI also worked their magic in Haiti. During the protests that eventually brought down the government, McCain and other United States officials personally flew into Ukraine to encourage protesters. On February 6, 2014, as the anti-government protests were intensifying, an anonymous party assumed by many to be Russia leaked a call between Assistant Secretary of State Nuland and United States Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt.
In early February of 2014, as the Maidan crisis was getting more violent, there was a phone call that was intercepted. It was a call between the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's
Good
the
night,
guy,
Yankee.
you know,
See you later,
he needs
buddy.
his Cleach and Tawny book on the outside.
Thank you, dude.
I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying you need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
So you had this remarkable phone call where you have these two senior officials of the U.S. government apparently talking about a coup or how they were planning to restructure the government of Ukraine.
The two officials discussed which opposition officials would staff a prospective new government, agreeing that Yatsenuk should be in charge. The Washington Post acknowledged that the call showed a deep degree of United States involvement in affairs that Washington only says are Ukraine's to resolve. But that fact rarely factored into the future coverage of the United States, Ukraine, and Russia relationship. It was also agreed that someone high profile be brought in to push things along. That someone was...
But I look to Dr. Sherwood. Are we moving?
Joe Biden, wake up. Joe Biden, wake up. 9/11.
One of the things that I strongly believe is
Joe Biden, wake up.
I should probably go home. I'm tired.
Joe Biden, wake up.
Joe. I'm tired.
Joe Biden.
What's happening?
Joe Biden.
What's happening? Joe. Hello, Mr. President. Wake up.
You should have to pay nearly $6,400 more than you would today.
How odd, how strange, how perfect for the late night.
Протестующих и силовиков на Майдане 3 года назад расстреливали наемные грузинские снайперы. Доказательства этого сегодня были представлены в Киевском суде. О признаниях людей, которые получили деньги за массовое убийство, заявил адвокат бывшего президента Януковича. Среди материалов и видеозапись бойни. Наемники даже согласились дать официальные показания. Подробности у Александра Балицкого.
Вы готовы давать показания в суде по видеоконференции? Скайпом, да. Готовы. Да.
Подписывая показания прямо перед камерой, они говорят, что готовы подтвердить все и украинскому суду. Единственное условие по видеосвязи из Армении, куда они уехали, опасаясь за жизнь. Граждане Грузии Александр Ривазишвили, Кубанергадзе, они принимали непосредственное участие в протестах на Майдане, обещают назвать именно тех, кто 4 года назад отдавал команду стрелять.
Действуйте как можно агрессивнее. У нас задача была делать провокации, всячески Беркут выводить из себя.
Неважно было, куда стрелять. В дерево или в баррикады, или в тех, кто бросал коктейли Молотова. Самое важное было стрелять, создавая...
Weeks later, on February 22nd, after a massacre by suspicious snipers brought tensions to a head, the Ukrainian parliament quickly removed Yanukovych from office in a constitutionally questionable maneuver. Yanukovych then fled the country, calling the overthrow a coup.
И на следующий день господин Янукович уехал во второй по величине город страны, в город Харьков. Как только он уехал, захватили и его резиденцию, администрации и правительство с помощью оружия. Как это называется?
Дело в том, что я вылетел туда вертолетом. Машины, которые меня должны были сопровождать, выехали самостоятельно. Но этого никто не знал. Ехали президентские машины, и по этой колонне президентских машин был открыт огонь. Также была информация у нашей разведки, что были специальные наемники, которым была поставлена задача не захватывать президента, а расстрелять. И я обратился к президенту Путину, чтобы он разрешил мне выехать на территорию России. Я получил согласие, и мне было оказано содействие. 24 февраля я попал на территорию России.
On February 27th, Yatsenuk became the prime minister.
Я хочу вам сказать, вы затронули
The Washington-backed opposition that toppled the government was fueled by far-right and openly Nazi elements like the Right Sector.
The most prominent among these extremist groups is an organization called Svoboda. The Svoboda Party, which traces its roots to the Ukrainian part.
I don't know if I'm here. I'm probably still going live. Probably still live on Kick.